Good afternoon and welcome listeners to Let's Go Sailing on 91.3 SportFM. Each week we bring you news and views from the world of sailing and water, both on and off the water. Tony Pugh is here. Good afternoon, Tony.
Good afternoon to you, Dr. Ed, and good afternoon to our listeners.
Tony, you've got a very special guest for us this afternoon.
I certainly do, Ed. As you probably know, I think I mentioned before, I did a radio operator's course at Hillary's Yacht Club recently, and while I was there was a young lady who was also doing it, who I met, talked to her about why she was doing the radio course, and she gave me a very interesting answer that we're going to pursue at greater length today. Her name is Heather Taylor. Welcome to you, Heather.
Thank you.
Heather is a young lady who is doing this radio course for good reason. She's a mid-30s professional with a degree in geological engineering. Come in any time, Heather, and tell me if I've got this wrong. She's born in Canada at a place called Stouffville. So Stouffville, okay, all right, that's close enough for me. Near Toronto, home of the mighty Blue Jays, to an Australian father who comes from 5 generations of residents in Albany, and a mother from Yemen who was a nurse. She's a dual citizen. She can row, but she cannot be a member of Parliament. She has lived in Canada and Australia and has travelled extensively as part of humanitarian study projects to Haiti, Malawi, Indonesia. How's that so far?
It's pretty good.
That
Beauty.
Sounds pretty amazing.
Now
so
I'll tell.
far.
Now that's fine.
Here,
now
Tony?
exactly. Well, I'm getting to that, Ed. So give me a second. At this radio course, I asked Heather if she sailed and why she was doing this course, and she very politely and quietly told me she was doing it because she's going to row across the Pacific Ocean from the USA here to Hawaii. Now, that shut me up for a little while, which is no mean feat. When I did gather my thoughts again, I asked her what and why and how. So tell our listeners the story, Heather, before I ask the question that we all want to know is why. What is it you are planning to do exactly?
So the basic plan is to get into an ocean rowing boat and row from Monterey, California to Hilo, Hawaii, starting in mid-April next year. And I'll be doing the row unsupported, so just me and my boat going across with radio calls as I go and satellite phone contact.
So by yourself, how far?
It's about 2,100 nautical miles.
Okay, so by yourself, rowing, no mothership.
No mothership.
And doing the whole lot yourself. Okay. What inspired you to do this, and why are you doing it solo?
So I think what inspired me was I saw a film at the Ocean Film Festival about 4 women who had done it. And it's one of those things that the idea gets planted, but you don't think much of it. But then starting to think about, I love rowing, but I think what really motivates me in my heart is wanting to do something about the injustice that I see in the world. And I don't want to live in a world where people go hungry. And right now, 1 in 11 people go to bed hungry. And that's 600 million people. But nor do I want it to be a place where a mother is holding her sick child and she's not able to do anything about it because she doesn't either know what to do because she's never been taught about health care, doesn't have access to health care, it's hundreds of kilometres away, or she doesn't have the money to pay for care that is nearby. So I think most people want to do something about having a just world but feel paralysed.
Okay, so you're raising money to help this. This stems from your humanitarian background that your mother and your father are heavily involved in with an organisation called Emmanuel International. We'll talk about them in just a moment. But where is that organisation based, for a start?
So Emmanuel International is in Canada, and then we're also partnering with an organisation here in Australia called Tier Australia.
Okay. Emmanuel International is in Western Australia too, I believe, too.
They did have an office, but they've actually just closed it up in the last couple of years.
So, and why solo?
I actually had a partner in the first time I tried to do it, and he ended up pulling out after a couple months. I think the bigness of it kind of sunk in. Had another friend who was keen for a bit, but she had to pull out for study reasons. So solo is not, I don't need to do it on my own, but it's just
been deserted.
Yes.
Listeners, if you've just joined us, it's Heather Taylor talking to us about going across the Pacific Ocean single-handedly in a rowboat.
Now, thanks, Ed. Now, as part of the why, I mentioned that you'd been to places over the world, Haiti, Malawi and so on humanitarian things, and that's where your mother and father are engaged in doing those sorts of things. We've had other adventurers on this radio station that we've had conversations with, and it always intrigues me where it comes from. Yours is motivated by that, but you mentioned that your father at one stage, when he was in Ethiopia, just up and decided to drive across the Sahara. Now, is this kind of adventurous nature, is this genetic? Is this partly where you get it from?
It's actually a funny question. I was talking to my aunt who lives here in Perth, and just that I think the Taylor approach to life is it's a good idea, so you just decide to do it. And I think, that's probably carried on within our family.
Good on you. I think it's mammoth. Tell us a little bit more about the trip. It's 2,100 nautical miles. There's a community, which I did a little bit of research on. There's a community of cross-ocean rowers. Go figure. But this trip, has it been done before? How many times been done before? Has it been done before by a woman, by an Australian, by a Canadian woman? Are you a first in some of
I would be a first, the first Canadian to row across the Pacific Ocean. An Australian woman has done it. She did it as part of a trio in 2016, and I think she was in the papers here as well. And so about 60 people, either solo or in a pair or in four, they have gone across that specific section of the Pacific. And then there are some who've done the whole Pacific, probably about 15 people.
Gee, an amazing stuff.
There is quite a community. We've had rowers before go across the Indian Ocean, starting in Carnarvon and rowing across to South Africa. So we've had quite a few. So it's nice to hear about all the Pacific Ocean rowers, and single-handedly, it's a big performance, Tony.
It is, and it's an amazing thing when you think that when you get into this, how many people sort of have, in a way, how many people have done it. The record, I know this is not necessarily a record attempt, but give us an idea of, I think it was Ros Savage, was from the UK, has done a fair bit of this stuff. I think she's been the fastest woman to do this.
Yes,
is that
so
right?
There's actually only one other woman, so Ros Savage, who's done that particular route solo. So she did it in 99 days.
And what are you heading for?
Well, if I could do 98, that'd be great.
So you've got a bit of a competitive spirit.
I feel like if you get there, that's great. It's sort of the cherry on top.
Okay. Now, you mentioned that you haven't got a mothership, which if I was your father, and I you're about the age of my daughter, I guess, I'd be a bit worried about. But you've got a lot of rowing to do. So what's the program when you row on a day-to-day basis? How long do you row for? How long do you rest? And what happens when you stop?
Yeah, so it depends if you're solo or in a team. So most people in a team would go 2 hours on, 2 hours off. And so the boat's always moving, so you don't have to worry about how to stop and do that. For solo rowers, they either decide to do it all day rowing with taking, short breaks, or they might break it up. So I'll probably end up either doing 4-hour sessions or 6-hour sessions. And then sleep for 4 or 6 hours. And so when you stop, you'd be putting in a parachute anchor or sea drogues just to prevent too much drift.
To stop you from going backwards. And so how fast do you go when I know it depends on the sea state, doesn't it? But if you're on flat water, for example, and I know you're going to be doing a bit of this that we'll talk about, what sort of speed do you generate, all things being equal?
It's pretty slow, so 1 or 2 knots. So ideally you're finding a current and sort of clipping along. So there's a man actually traveling from Japan at the moment, and he's in a current, and I was told he's going 4 knots, which is pretty winning.
It would. And you're doing this in April of next year.
Yes.
Your departure is in April. Is that when the tides and the winds are best for you? Is that your window?
I think the window is probably out of winter storms and then trying to get across before hurricane season starts, which it starts to pick up.
Best to keep out of those.
Late August and September.
Yeah. Now, we did discuss this. We had this long conversation, which was fascinating some time ago, and we haven't got enough time to repeat all of it. But the proposition of being at sea for 3 months, 3.5 months, whatever it might be, by yourself, and the entertainment you've got is rowing, and then trying to get yourself something to eat. What do you do? What are your plans to entertain yourself? It's a lot of time.
Audiobooks, I think. Yeah, that'll probably be the most part of it. Music, praying. Got lots of time to think. I might think of problems I can solve as I go. Yeah.
Have you met Ros Savage and spoken to her about this?
I haven't met her.
You've seen the interviews?
I have seen interviews, and I've had correspondence sort of included in as a CC.
Okay.
Yeah.
The reason I asked that is I saw an interview with her, and she said she spent a lot of time doing things like abusing the sea, swearing at it. She appreciated being able to use the language freely and talking to herself. So
yes, I expect to do that.
I expect you might be doing that too. The boat that you're going to go, you've bought a boat now. It's not here yet. It's still in the UK. Tell us about the boat.
So the boat it's about 24 feet long, and width-wise it might be 2 meters wide. It's got a cabin where you can sleep on one end and then a storage cabin on the other end. It's got 2 rowing positions in it, and I probably won't change that because most pairs row solo. It was designed by Phil Morrison, and it's meant to be unsinkable, so you just lock up the
handy.
hatches.
Yeah.
And it's self-righting, stable boat.
So it's done. It's not brand new. It's done.
No, it has done. So it's gone
before.
across the North Atlantic,
Yeah.
and as well as it's actually done this route. It did it in 2016.
Okay, and once again, going back to Ros Savage, who's a good example, I think, of some of the experiences you can expect. She mentioned that she took, I think, 6 or 8 or something oars, and she was glad she did because she had to patch them up, that the sea conditions broke them up as she's going. Did you get that from any interviews with her?
Yeah, so you always want to take extra oars. So the boat is coming with 3 pairs of oars, and there was actually 2 pairs of oars left from rowers who did try to do the Indian Ocean. So I have 2 pairs here in Perth already.
I've
got 5
carbon
sets.
fibre?
They are carbon fibre.
And you're still breaking them up. That's a very interesting thing. What have you done so far in your training program? What is your training program to date, and how are you working up to this?
So training-wise, there's the physical training. So I'm doing weight training at the moment, and then doing some cardio as well. It's actually a bit hard to do the training properly until you get the boat.
Okay.
They call it weight training, which is actually WAIT, which is wait for the boat and then train, because or else you're working the wrong muscles. And then land training in terms of, I've got my radio license, which was how we met.
Yep.
And then doing a navigation course, so learning celestial navigation in particular as well, in case all the power goes out. Sea safety is quite a big issue, so taking a sea safety course. Meteorology, and then first aid at sea.
Wow.
That's probably...
Okay. You have to talk to Dr. Ed about that. He'll be able to give you a hand with that sort of thing.
It's actually mind-blowing. I'm just sitting here listening to Tony interview on Let's Go Sailing Heather Taylor, and normally we talk about sailing, but so much of what Heather's about to do is involved in ocean racing with the navigation, the nutrition, the weights, and all of the stuff that Heather Taylor's been talking about. I'm really fascinated by it.
Yes, it is, isn't it? And so was I, Ed. Look, we spent hours talking about this. Let's get on to something a little bit more practical. You're doing this to raise funds. You're hoping to get a certain amount of dollars. I think it was a couple of $100,000, which I think is a fairly modest figure for what you're seeking to do. I'd be wanting. Well, I know you're not getting that money, but if I was doing it, I'd want more than that to do it. But you're into fundraising.
Yes.
And also sponsorship. Just tell us quickly the difference between those two and how they work.
Okay, so fundraising is entirely going to the work of Tier Australia or Manual International. They partner with local organisations in different countries so that they're basically working with the people to help themselves develop and work their way out of poverty. So that's where the fundraising is going. So the goal is $250,000. And then there's a sponsorship side is basically I need to get to the start line. So I've got a boat, so someone's made a very generous loan to me. So I've been able to get the boat, but I still need to cover other costs. So it's covering things like the shipping, getting the boat from England to here to the US. Insurance, paying for safety training courses. I need a place to store the boat as well while it's in Perth. And then also, as I'm going, paying for the service of getting the weather, making sure there's someone 24/7 I can ring.
And you've got different sponsorship packages, I think, too, have you, with different levels? What are some of those levels, and what do you expect to be able to give back to the sponsors for becoming involved?
Yeah, so we're probably targeting businesses and corporations. So that one, looking at, there's a bronze, I think it's bronze, silver, and gold. So anything above $500 up to $10,000, then $10,000 above that, and $20,000. And basically, it's sort of tiered. Getting logo on the boat will come do any promotions. When I say me, and then I've got my support team. And then there's also one called Stowaways, which is $250 and get your name on the boat. So this is just for the average person. And as I'm rowing across, I get to look at your name and be encouraged by it.
That might be a good thing.
And also, to be honest,
a bad thing. I hope it doesn't come with a picture.
If your name's on the boat, you'll probably actually make more of the videos that we're making.
And look, one of the things that I personally want to know, when this boat gets here, you're going to be rowing it around the river and things like that, so we'll see you around. Can sponsors and can some other people, particularly sponsors, I think, can we jump on the boat and go for a row with you one evening and have a glass of champagne while you do all the work?
Well, it's a tiny space, so yes.
Okay.
You can sit on the other seat.
That'd be great. And Heather, just before we go to a break, that we need to have a word from our sponsors, but how do we contact you? How does somebody who might be interested in this get in touch with you and your team?
Okay, so the big thing, so the team is Pacific Giants Row.
Or one word?
3 separate words, but when you put it
okay.
into a website, it makes the one word. So www.pacificgiantsrow.com. And you can find us on Facebook and Instagram as well.
And Pacific Giants?
Pacific Giants.
What does that mean?
So it was originally, we were thinking of going from Peru to Tahiti, which is quite a historical route.
Yeah.
And so that's the idea of standing on the shoulders of giants. So I'm not clearly long history of ocean going, so I'm learning from other people who've done it before. So standing on their shoulders to see further.
Fantastic. I sit here in awe, as I think does Dr. Ed, in relation to what you're doing. Let's take a quick break and a word from our sponsors for a moment. We'll come back and talk a little bit more to cross-ocean rower Heather Taylor. Welcome back, listeners, to 91.3 Sport FM, and let's go sailing on. Tony Pugh with me as regular host, Dr. Ed Fethers, and our special guest today is Heather Taylor, who's going to be setting off in just under 12 months' time now to go rowing across the Pacific from Monterey in California to the beautiful big island of Hawaii, where she's going to lob on those black beaches of Hilo.
Fascinating
you'd
stuff.
be bloody happy to get there too, Heather. But Ed, you had a couple of things you wanted to raise with Heather as well.
I have. I've been sitting back listening to you, Heather, and I've got a couple of questions for you. The first one is, how much time have you spent out on the ocean in your life before, and what have you done?
Ocean, not that much, and that's where I'm building up my seamanship skills.
Yep.
So probably just ferries for the most part. I'm trying to think of the smallest boat might have been whale watching, obviously going over to Fremantle occasionally. Yeah, unless you have a boat, it's actually quite hard to get out onto the ocean. That's limiting.
Prior to the break, you were talking with Tony Pugh about how you're going to spend the time on your own alone. Have you spent a lot of time on your own alone in your life so far?
I would have. I think I was trying to figure out the longest I've had no contact with people. It might have been 6 days. I was doing some study in New Zealand, hiding in the West Coast to do some writing. That's probably the longest stretch of time. I did go to Indonesia when I was doing research on my own. I had friends there, but I was the only Anglophone and I guess Westerner that I knew. So it was quite probably a lonely experience. So I'm used to spending lots of time with myself. I'm sure at some point I'll probably crack, but I'm not too afraid of being alone. Yep. I think after that length of time, something will.
Yeah, and I guess my only other concern is what you're going to eat. Do you do fishing on the rowing boat when you're out in the ocean, or do you take the freeze-dried food?
I'll definitely be taking the freeze-dried food, so I'll probably go through about 4 main meals a day and then have a snack pack. If I can fish, I've never been super good at it, I will fish as I go, but I would not want to rely on that being my main food source.
If you can catch something big that's heading west, I'd suggest you tie it on the bow. And it
sounds like a good idea. But look, listeners, I'm sure you will have lots of questions you would like to ask Heather Taylor, and she's going to row from Monterey through to Hawaii, and this is a long row, but she'll be in Perth for a while, and you'll see her rowing around the river and on the ocean. Please get in touch with her. Or us through 91.3 Sport FM, and we can put you in touch with Heather Taylor.
Look, needless to say, we wish you good luck. I wanted to ask you one more quick question. Your parents?
Yes.
What are their names?
Brian and Elizabeth.
Okay. What do they think about this?
They are cautiously supportive.
Well put. I think I would be too. Thank you very much. Look, we will follow you, and listeners, if you're out there thinking you might be able to help Heather in some way, and more importantly for yourself, be a part of what's going to be a really record-breaking and a fantastic achievement for young Heather, please contact Heather at Pacific Giants Row through the internet, or you can contact me through 91.3 Sport FM, and I'll be happy to put you in touch with Heather. That's how you get involved. Thank you very much, Heather, for coming in. It's been an absolute
thank you so much
pleasure.
for having me on the show. It's been great.
We shall keep in touch. Stay tuned, everyone, for the weekend preview. But for now, while this weather holds, Ed, let's go. Is it rowing?
No, Sony, sailing and rowing.